So in the next couple of videos, we're going to look at some of the JavaScript components that come with Bootstrap, which allow you to add even more interactivity to your websites. The first one we're going to look at is the modal. So I'll firstly just show you what a modal window is. I'm sure you've come across them. It's something like that. So just a simple pop-up essentially, which blocks off the background content and gives your user maybe a login form or a bit of information or something that you want to really bring their attention to. So these are really easy to put together with Bootstrap. Let's find out how we do it. So let's clear out our Bootstrap file. It's nice and clean. Great. Okay, so to introduce a modal, what we do is we have a div, and unsurprisingly, we give it a class of modal. Now that will, by default, make that div not actually show. So if I put some content in there, you can't actually see it because the modal by default is hidden, and it will only pop up when you press the button or do whatever it is that you want the user to do for the modal to appear. So we won't actually be able to see anything until we make this modal live. So we've created our modal. We need to give it an ID so it can refer to, or so that we can refer to it in our code. So we'll call it MyModal for the moment, keep it very simple. And then we'll just create a quick button which will link to that modal and make it pop up so we can see what's going on. So we'll give it a class of button and we'll call it a button success. So a nice green link. And now these are the key bits of code that we need. We need a data toggle and we set that equal to modal. So that states that we want this button to toggle, i.e. bring up the modal window. And then we need to give it a data target, and that will be the ID of the modal that we've created and that we want to pop up. So of course you might have more than one modal on a particular page, and this is how you refer to the one that you want. And then we'll just have some text, launch modal. And we'll close our button. So that's a very basic bit of code. So it launches the modal, but of course there's nothing actually there to launch. So you can see it's had that effect, but it's not actually loading anything because we need to add a bit more code into our modal. So what we do is we have a container div for our modal content, which we call modal dialog. So a dialog box is essentially another word for a modal. So that's our container div for our modal content. And then we have another div within that called modal content. All of these divs are essentially required for Bootstrap to make everything display nicely. We can have a quick look at that, see how that looks. Still empty at the moment because we don't have any content in there. Okay, so we have three parts to a modal. We'll start with the modal header, which of course goes at the top. And then within that, we need a button to close the modal first of all. So we'll have a simple button and we'll give it a class of close. Remember we had the same class when we had the button to close the alert box in the last video. And then this time we need a data dismiss of modal. Last time it was an alert because we were dismissing the alert. And we'll use the X symbol again, but you can use anything you like there. Okay. So that's our button to dismiss the modal, and then we'll have a title. Usually H4 is about the right size for a modal title. So we'll have an H4 and we'll give it a class of modal title. and we'll give it just some basic text there. Okay, and then I'll just tab that in. We'll close our modal header div. So now we should actually be able to see something when we click on that. Great, so all we've got so far is a title, my modal, and an X, which then closes it down. Notice you can click anywhere else and that will also close the modal, so it's nicely featured. Okay, so that's the first part of our modal, the title. Now we want the main section of the modal, which we call the modal body. So div class equals modal body. What a fantastic modal. Okay, and now let's see how that looks like. Great. So we've got a nice title and we've got our fantastic modal content as well. All right, the third part of the modal is the footer. So let's put that in. Usually we use the footer to put in some buttons to either confirm what they want to do or to cancel or something like that. So we'll put in a couple of buttons. So this one will have a class of button and then a button default. So just a blue button, and this one's going to dismiss the modal. So we add the data dismiss equals modal, exactly the same as we had for the little X up there. And then we just want some text of close. And then we'll have another button for doing whatever it is that we want to do, or the user might want to do when this modal pops up. So we want a button success for this one. And that's all we need. Save changes. Okay, let's see what that looks like. Really nice. So that's a really great modal. So modals are a great way to alert the user to either log in or do something else, or to bring an important message to them. One other thing that I'm going to show you before we stop this video is to change the size of the modal. In the modal dialog div, you can add an extra class of modal SM if you want a particularly small modal. So let's see what difference that makes. So we've now got a nice little modal. Notice that if we make this small, it doesn't actually make any difference on the phone screen size. So on the phone you still get this full size modal, which is probably what you want. But in some cases you might just want a small alert message, and then on a full screen the small modal does a lot of good.